Hi, today at the Willow Forge I'm going to show you how to make a small tomahawk, and I'm going to use wood ashes as the flux. It's one of those seldom used traditional fluxes. If you wonder what they used 250 years ago on the frontier, it certainly wasn't 20 mule team borax. So, have a little piece of bar stock. This is 3/16 by 3/4, and I'm going to mark out a piece about 6 inches long. That will be our tomahawk. So 6 inches. I use cut. I'm going to put a little notch, because the little notch won't disappear in the heat. So, hopefully you are all well. This is being videoed on March the 23rd in the midst of all of the confusion and worry about the coronavirus. I don't have anything useful to say about that, other than it has disrupted work in the shop enough, and it's taken me a little time to get back to making videos. There are other things that have been going on that have disrupted posting videos to YouTube, but you probably don't need to hear about those either. Everybody has their own problems at this point. So, people sometimes comment about the fact that I don't edit out heating things up in the forge. Well, partly that's because I believe that you need to have an idea of how long it takes, and a little bit about fire control and how to tend the fire. I have students that have a really hard time just heating things up. They're always fooling with the fire. They don't put the metal in the right place in the fire. Lots of problems. Anyway, this is getting close, and what I should do is redirect the camera toward where the action's going to be, which will be down on the anvil. Alright, I have that little notch that I put in there. I bring that over on the hot cut. Hit it twice. I don't want to cut it all the way through, because then the bar would go flying across the shop, and it's generally impolite to throw red hot pieces of metal at people on the other side of the shop. So, what I'm going to do is scarf with a little bevel on that end of the bar, turn it around, and put a little scarf, little bevel on that side. I'm angling the hammer so that I get sort of a crown right in the middle of the bar. And I'm only doing that for the first 1 3/4, 1.5 on the end of the bar. Now, I have to move the camera again. I'm going to focus on the vise. Being able to lay out what you want to bend, I'm marking out 1.5 inches and marking it with soapstone on the vise. You'll see from this edge of the vise over, it's 1.5 inches. Okay. Why that's important will be apparent in a moment. What I like to do to make tomahawks is put a pair of right angle bends in the bar so that I can make the eye with a nice transition. Okay, so I put the bar in next to the chalk mark with the crown of the bevel pointing that way. I bend it, then I tap it to make a right angle bend in the bar. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And you'll see in a moment how that's useful in making the shape of the tomahawk. A lot of people just bend a bar around, forge weld it, and then drive the drift to make the eye round. I tend to like to do these double right angles because it makes a crisper transition. Okay, now you have a piece that's like that, kind of a big staple. All right. We'll move the camera around to look at the anvil again. Look at that. Put this piece in the fire. I've got both legs of that staple standing upwards so that they will be cool, and the center part is going to be hot. And I'm going to grab both ears and simply bend it around and get most of the shape for the eye. Take a moment. Now I'm showing you all of this without the infrared and cut filter on the camera. When I go to forge welding, I'm going to put the filters on because you really can't see anything without them. There's a huge glare problem from the heat of the metal. Some people complain that it makes things look dark and hard to see. See, I'm going to hold this like this. You see how I bend that around like that. I'll get that out of the way. And then I have a pair of tongs, a right angle pair of tongs, a pair of lip tongs. That lets me grab that in the middle like that, and I can you see the shape? It's not perfectly even. That's okay. Now, I've got a little piece of steel. This is part of a lawnmower blade that was cut up and forged out. And I'm going to scarf a little piece that will be the steel edge and insert it in there. So that will go in the fire. This will go in the fire to get warm to where it's going to need to be fluxed. Just take a moment for that little piece of lawnmower blade. It's hard enough to scarf, so I put a little bevel all the way around. I'll get the hot cut, not hot enough to cut, so I'll heat it up again and cut it off. Same time, I'm going to take a little can full of wood ashes from my wood stove at home. I make buckets full of wood ashes through the course of the year, through the course of the winter. I'm going to take some wood ashes and put it on the hot steel. And you see how they sort of stick to the steel? Wood ashes will melt at about 1500 degrees and form a flux. I'm going to put that over here for the moment. Pull this out of the fire. Take my little piece of steel. Wiggle it off. Take the hardy out so I don't hurt myself. Oh, I dropped that little piece of steel. That's always a good thing to do. So, a little piece of steel that will be the edge of the tomahawk gets inserted. And I'm going to put a little bit more wood ashes. In there. And that's the only flux I'm using, is just hardwood ashes. Now I'm going to put this in the fire flatways and flip it over after a minute or so that both sides get an even heat. Put that in there. This is when I get to put the filter on the camera. It's in the fire. And we're using wood ashes as a flux. So this is, I would say, about a half scale size tomahawk. I've actually thrown hawks this small, so they're kind of cute. You can think of it as baby's first tomahawk. Well, maybe not. I don't know about your baby, but I think most babies need to have a tomahawk. Got to start them young. Of course, it could lead to them chopping through the bars in their crib and escaping, so you have to be careful about that. the metal for the body of the Tomahawk is just regular mild steel. Nothing special. And we haven't done anything to put a taper in the eye. We've just bent that around, and that will happen. The taper in the eye will be put in with a drift after it's been forge welded. And I typically put 2 overlapping forge welds on a Tomahawk just to make sure that everything is welded nice and tight all the way up to the edges on the side. Alright, about time for me to rotate this in the fire. I've got one side of it pretty hot. And because it's really 3 pieces, you get a much better weld if you rotate it around so that you can get enough heat to all parts of it without burning any. Now, unlike borax, the wood ashes don't really give you an indicator in the fire. There's not enough sodium in the wood ashes to make a yellowy flare in the fire when they get hot enough. They aren't really boiling off like the borax does. So you actually have to have a little window built in the fire so you can see the color of the metal to make sure you're up to temperature. You want to see a bright lemony yellow color for mild steel. Coming up on it pretty soon here. Alright. I gotta grab this thing out of the fire. I gotta get some of this junk out of the way. Right. Get my hammer ready. Turn it over. Yep. That was the first weld. I'm going to reflux it. Again, just with wood ashes from my wood stove at home. You can see how they will stick, and if you sort of squeeze them on with the hammer, you'll actually see them sort of melt and go sticky. They'll actually stick to the metal. So that's the wood ash. Okay, back in the fire. And we'll do the second weld. One of the other things that's kind of weird about doing this for a YouTube video is that because of the cut filters, I'm having to run an awful lot of shop lights. So right now it's quite bright in here. You can't really tell that much from the videos, but it does skew what I see in the fire. It's kind of like if you're set up with a portable forge outside, the sunshine washes out the colors that you see on the metal, and they look like they're cooler. Kind of the opposite of what happens with the cameras. Colors always look hotter on camera. I think it's just that the human eye is adapted differently than cameras. And it really is hard to make a video that looks like what you actually see if you're in the room. One reason why actually taking a course in person is sometimes better than trying to learn these things online, get a much better idea of what the colors and the timing are. One of the other things you should be looking for is that when I hit it, the flux squirts out from the forge weld joint, which shows you that those wood ashes have actually melted. They've turned into a kind of a slag, a thin glass. Back in the Middle Ages, they actually made glass with wood ashes and sand. They'd get wood ashes from beech trees and the cleanest, whitest sand that they could lay hands on and melt them together to make glass. Right, getting up to temperature here. Another 10 or 15 seconds. Getting close. Right, I'm going to put my tongs in it, grab my hammer. You can see, whoops, that's the Tomahawk welded up. I'm going to get it hot again and shape. I'll put a little, no reason not to take it up to a welding heat to shape it. Take advantage of the extra heat and also give it an insurance weld. I'll put a little more wood ash flux on there. Back and fire. The advantage of a small Tomahawk for demonstration purposes is that it does heat up faster and you can do this whole process much quicker. The disadvantage is that being a smaller piece, it loses the welding heat relatively quickly. You only have about 10 seconds to actually make the weld. Any hammering you do after that is just moving the metal around. It's not actually welding. This is a problem some people have when they don't get the metal hot enough when they're welding. They'll hit on it anyways, and they'll basically remove their scarf by driving the two pieces of metal together so that they can form and shape without being hot enough to actually make the weld. So you've removed the exit for the flux. So the flux as a liquid goes into that space, and when you hit it with a hammer, it has a hard time getting out, squeezing out. One reason you put the scarf on the two pieces of metal before you weld is so that there is a direction, a pathway for squeezing the flux out between the pieces of metal. If they don't have a direction to escape, they'll get trapped and they'll prevent the metal from contacting. So no matter how hot you get it, the metal just can't touch the metal because the flux is in the way. So the flux has to have a pathway to escape. Getting close here again. Nice and hot. thing is you don't want to heat too quickly to a forge welding heat, because then you can melt or burn off the hot tip or edge before you've got the rest of the body of the work up to the temperature. So you can't just throw it in there and get it as hot as you can, as fast as you can, because you'll melt things. Getting there. Right. Tongs in. Get the hammer ready. I'm going to shape it a little bit by angling it and putting the kirk or the notch. Grab it from the other way. You can see we're getting the basic shape of the tomahawk. Depends on how much of a fuss budget you want to be. About that shape. I generally clean up the ends a little bit when I put the edge on it, so I don't need to get it perfectly shaped out there, but I will clean it up just so it looks better here. And then we'll turn it around and drift out the eye. I have tapered punch. Oh, let's see, we might need a bigger one. By having a bunch of tapered punches, that's probably a better tapered punch. We'll have this handy. All of them handy. Okay. Take the wire brush and just hit the very edge. Yeah. And that's just refining the shape a little bit so that when I file or grind that off, I'll have a better corner up in that transition there. All right, I'm going to turn my little tomahawk around. And we're going to make that eye pretty. The eye, you can see, is a little bit wonkus right now, but that's just because it's had a hard life. Ready. And different pair of tongs. Not surprisingly, you want to have the top of the eye bigger than the bottom so that the tapered handle of the tomahawk will wedge in there. Okay, so we have a nice hot eye. We'll put that in right there. So you see, we've got a nice round eye now, and it's got a little bit of a taper in it because of how we've used the taper drift on the top. Right. And heat treating one of these little tomahawks, there is that little piece of steel in there. And all you have to do is heat it to a dull red, and you need a little grinding stone handy. And you don't even need much water. I'm going to use the little cat food container full of water here, just so you can see it. So, that much gets hot. I quench that and shine it up with the rock, and I watch the colors run. Because tomahawks get thrown around and take a lot of abuse, what I want to see is a purple to blue edge. You can see the colors starting to run. And I quench it, cool it off. Here, I'll get closer so you can see the colors. You can see it's kind of blue.